how to participate in our democracy and vote in Australia. Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today I'm going to help teach you how to vote in Australia and what it means in our bicameral voting system. So in Australia, we have two houses of parliament, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Australian House of Representatives is where the government is formed. It's where you will always get your Prime Minister, and you will know which government is the leader of Australia, will be the one that has the majority or commands a majority in the House of Representatives. The Senate, by contrast, is a House of Review, which has a different voting system for electing people and is much more likely to contain a variety of minor parties who can hold the government to account and act as a check and balance on government power. In the House of Representatives, you as an individual are voting for one person. So you're not voting for a prime minister, you're not voting for a government, you're voting for one person. And you're voting for that person who is local to you. They are a local member. They're a member of parliament, right? And the way in which we vote, and I love the way in which we vote for these House of Representative members, I do think it's the best in the world, is a preferential voting system. That means that whoever you like most out of all of the candidates, you put as number one. Who you like second most, you put as number two, third, fourth, and so on, all the way down the line. And that allows you to order your preferences in such a way that if your preferred candidate doesn't win, your vote isn't spent, it goes to the next preferred candidate, right? And that way, what happens is in the count is, let's say you've got 6 candidates. When they've counted up all the votes once, there'll be one candidate who comes in 6th. So that person will drop out. And they'll go and look at their votes and go, all right, whose was their second preference? And those votes are redistributed to the remaining 5 candidates. And that might reorder the candidates, right? And then after that process is done, whoever's 5th drops out, and the process continues until you get one candidate with a majority. So you always know that that local candidate has a plurality of support in the electorate among their local constituency. And that person will be a member of a political party normally. There are some independents, but usually they'll be a member of a political party. And they will throw their support behind their leadership to form a government, right? And whoever has a majority in the House of Representatives convinces the Queen or Governor General that they can command the House, ergo have a stable government to deliver policy outcomes for Australia, and that they have a mandate from the people to deliver their policy platform. That is how the government of Australia is formed. In the Senate, it is a House of Review. Now, we are a federation that is combined of both single-member electorates and multi-member states. We're all part of a state or a territory. Each state in Australia, so Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, Western Australia, they each have 12 senators, right? Each of the territories, Northern Territory and the ACT, have 2 senators, okay, because they're not a full state. And that forms the entire Senate. Now, when you vote in a Senate election, which you will do at the same time as your federal election, and I'll get to why that is, when you vote in your Senate election, you're not usually voting for individuals, although there'll be independents and people, and you will have their names, and you do have control if you want to, but most people tend to vote for above the line for parties. But you can vote below the line if you like person A from this party, but prefer person B from this other party. You have complete control to vote however you want, right? So that's very useful. But what it means is that there'll be a certain percentage of the vote given to all the different parties. So if you've got 10% of the vote for your preferred party, they'll tend to get around 10% of the seats in the Senate, okay? Doesn't rely on anyone having an absolute majority like it does in the lower house. So it's a very different way of voting, and you get a different group of people making up the Senate. You have a lot more minor parties. So if you've got a party that has only 5% of the vote nationwide, well, they're probably not going to get any members, right? Because they don't have a majority in any one seat. But they still have a plurality of support. There are still people that want to vote for them. So they do get representation in the Senate. And the Senate is the House of Review, right? So when a piece of legislation is proposed, the Australian federal government will put it through the House of Representatives. They'll usually pass it because they've got a majority, and then it goes to the Senate. And quite often the government won't have a majority in the Senate. So they need to negotiate with parties to explain why their legislation is being introduced, why it's important, will be good for the country. And if there are amendments and things that the senators want, the government of the day is forced to consider them because otherwise their legislation might be rejected. Very important to have this check and balance and to ensure that on one hand you have a strong government that can deliver results and form an agenda under a certain control, but another house where there's all these other minor parties that have gotten a certain amount of vote and deserve some representation, and they also have real power. So that's the bicameral system. So when you go into your voting booth and you get 2 sheets of paper, that's what you've got. You've got one for the House of Representatives, which is that one member that you're voting for, and in the Senate, a plurality of members, because at each normal election, all of the House of Representatives is up for re-election, and then half the Senate, because a 3-year term between federal elections, every lower house MP has a 3-year term, and every senator has a 6-year term. Okay, so every normal election, you've got the full House of Representatives coming up and half the Senate. Okay, so if you've only got 6 senators, no, you actually have 12. It's just that only half of them come up each election. There is an exception to that, which is called a double dissolution election, where both houses of parliament are dissolved, and that is usually to resolve an impasse. If the federal government introduces a piece of legislation a couple of times and it's knocked back completely by the Senate both times and neither side is willing to give way, if the federal government says, look, I have an absolute mandate to deliver this is core to our policy agenda, it is essential that we get this piece of legislation through, or if the Senate says, look, we don't think it's good for the country, we don't think this is right for the people, we don't think it's right for our constituents, ergo we've got to block it, well, the Prime Minister of the day, through the Governor General, has the option to say, look, we're going to dissolve both houses of Parliament and have a fresh election all at once and give that to the people to decide. Okay, so that's a special case, but normally an election every 3 years, you vote for every MP and half the Senate. In Australia, it is compulsory to vote, so it is essential that people understand this, because if you have to do it, it's important to know how. So perhaps this video will be very useful for, I think, high schools as people are about to go out and vote for the first time. Perhaps, early university in their first election. People who just have not done it before, have no understanding as to what they're supposed to do and why. They might just vote on their intuition, but it's really useful to know the real life impact that your vote will have, not only in who forms the government, but actually the way the parliament will work. So hopefully this has been informative to you if you're unfamiliar with the Australian system. And if you have any questions at all, we would be delighted to answer them. Just leave them down below. And please like and subscribe, because we've got a lot more comparisons on political systems, why I think the Australian system is so good, how it compares with other countries, how other countries compare with each other. Particularly if you're from another background, we might be able to do yours as well. So stay tuned and we will do these in future videos. Thank you.